first thing to understand for investors is, why do promoters pledge shares? In that lies the answer to the problem, or answer to the question on whether pledges are dangerous for investors. Promoters can borrow money in ordinary circumstances through a variety of routes. When they start pledging more and more of their holding in a company, usually it betrays some kind of liquidity tightness on the part of the promoter and not very easy access to funds, because promoters usually will not leverage their own stock or holding in the company as a first recourse. Only when they have exhausted other options of raising money or getting loans would they finally come down to the last resort of pledging their shares and getting loans against that collateral. So the basic idea is that it is a loan of last recourse and not ordinarily referred to or used by promoters, and therefore it automatically betrays some kind of liquidity tightness. This usually happens for companies where their debt situation is slightly fragile, and this is another thing which investors should keep in mind. Whenever they see very high pledges, they should take a quick look at the balance sheet of the company, and 8 times out of 10 it would appear that the balance sheet of the company is quite stretched. So for all these reasons, liquidity tightness, bad or precarious debt situation of the company, a promoter pledge is usually a bit of a red herring, or a bit of a red flag, I should say, for investors. So how do pledged shares actually lead to a fall in the stock? The thing is that when shares are pledged to a bank or to any institution, and the value of that stock falls for any reason, then the value of the collateral of the pledged shares also falls. And the laws of banking and the laws of lending are such that when a loan has been extended against a block of shares of a certain value, and the value of that collateral comes down, then the bank or the lender will immediately call the promoter and ask them for a top up to make allowances for the shortfall in the collateral value. So either the promoter has to top up basically by paying cash, or has to return some of the loaned amounts back to the lender. Now this presents a problem, because the promoter, if it has a very high pledge, automatically means that he is not or she is not in a great liquidity position, and therefore the promoter's ability to top up that collateral because of the fall in the value of the stock, or to return some of the loaned amounts back to the lender, is actually quite suspect. Usually promoters are not able to do that, and that leads to the dangerous thing, which is that the lender, having not got that top up, starts selling some of that pledged stock into the market, and this becomes a vicious spiral. First the stock falls, then the value of the collateral falls, and when the top up does not come, the lender sells the stock and the stock falls some more. The more the stock falls, the more the collateral top up required, and therefore the more the propensity to sell down more of the stock. There have been recent instances of such major downward spirals in stock prices from prominent groups in the market, and this has highlighted the risks associated, technical risks associated with high pledge of shares. So basically, anytime there is a high pledge, promoter pledge in the stock, the chances of volatility in the stock price have actually gone up significantly, and in the event of a stock price falling, the chances of that actually, the fall being accelerated on the way down into a downward spiral, actually become manifold. The first thing to watch out for is, what is the amount of pledge. It's not necessary that a promoters pledging shares is a bad thing. In fact, it's a routine practice for a lot of entrepreneurs, and from time to time they do need to take recourse to pledging their shares to avail of loans. That's fine. It's only when the amount of pledge becomes very large, say a promoter pledges 60-70% of his stock or more, then there is a problem. Pledging 10-15% of one's holding in a company is par for the course in India. Nobody should be very alarmed. So the first thing that the investors should watch out for is what percentage is actually pledged. I would say, as a thumb rule, more than 50% or 60% of the holding of a promoter being pledged is usually a bit of a red flag. Anything above that can easily lead to an out of control situation and volatility and a spiraling down of stock prices. The other thing is the corollary that a very high promoter pledge usually means a high level of debt, and whenever investors find that more than 50-60% is pledged, they should do a quick look at the overall debt servicing ability of the company, and that should not crop up as another red flag that there is not enough cash flow to pay back the loans of the company. Finally, on the other way, investors should always keep an eye on promoters' pledged shares being revoked, which is basically the promoter saying, I've got cash right now and I want to turn back some of the pledged shares and revoke them. That is usually a good sign that a promoter had a 40% of his promoter holdings pledged, and now for some reason the promoter pledges have come down to 20%. That is a healthy sign that liquidity tightness is gone, the promoters in a better liquidity situation, and maybe even heralding the improvement in a balance sheet of the company. So it works both ways, and therefore one has to constantly monitor which way the amount of pledged shares is moving.